A gute Woche, and since it's Motzei Shabbos, I'd like to share with you a story which I heard this past week. I was in conversation with a shliach, Rabbi Yoska Greenberg, who's a shliach in Alaska, in Anchorage. And we were in conversation. He wanted to get some clarity about the times, because you got there such very long days in summer. What happens with Ma'ariv and things like that. In addition, you have a very interesting complication, which I don't want to go into now, is about where you draw the date line, because the international date line is between Fairbanks, I think, and Vladivostok, between Russia and Alaska. That's 180 degrees from Greenwich. But if you do 180 degrees from Yerushalayim, that's going to cut through Alaska. So that's a question that was really his main discussion. But meanwhile, the story is about someone called Lippe Brennan. He's a Manchester boy, and he was Niskar to Chabad, and he is subsequently in 770. And in the summer, the Rebbe encouraged the Bochrim to travel, what we called Merkez Shlichus, to travel to small communities or even less than communities, to individuals, and to give some Yiddish input. And so he was given a slot to go to Alaska. And he was going to go to Alaska with a Chava, I've forgotten who it was, and they were going to go there for 3 weeks. Now this is in summer. So now he asked Rabbi Chadukov. Rabbi Chadukov is the Rebbe's secretary, very, very close secretary. And he asked Rabbi Chadukov, who was also like the, should we say, the leader of operations. So he asks Rabbi Chadukov, what should he do about Zmanim for davening? Because he realized the challenges even before he had gone out. So Rabbi Chadukov first gave him a bit of a runaround, go to Rabbi Zalman Shimon, who was the Rav. Rabbi Zalman Shimon says, ask the Rebbe. So the Rebbe said the following. I'm saying the Rebbe's Lashon. The Rebbe said they should daven the same times as they daven in Yeshiva in 770. There's haste to daven at 9:30, a Shachris, and Mincha to daven at 3:15, and Ma'ariv they should daven at 9:30 p.m. And then the Rebbe said this beautiful Lashon. I'll say first in Yiddish and then translate. If I'll daven the same time as 770, so the Rebbe, wollen sie trachten von uns, wollen wir trachten wegen sie. If they will daven, they make it a point to daven the same times as 770, so they will be thinking about us. They will be thinking about the Rebbe in 770, and reciprocally, we will think about them. The Rebbe says, I will be thinking of them, which is something which all of us can take with. I just want to add just another halacha twist on this, that we all know the concept of shoas zmaniyos, of hours, which become longer in summer and shorter in winter because the hours are 12th of the day. Now, in a climate, or whatever, in a place, a time where the day is 24 hours, so a shor zmanis is, instead of being 60 minutes, is 120 minutes. Now, as you all know, in summer, many fine Jews in this part of the world will daven Ma'ariv early. What's the earliest you can daven Ma'ariv? From Plaga Mincha. What is Plaga Mincha? By definition, it's an hour and a quarter before the end of the day. So in a climate, in a time where the day is 24 hours, so then 1.25 hours becomes 2.5 hours. So 9:30 is exactly 2.5 hours before Chatzos, before midnight. So in addition to the idea that Rebbe says, wir wollen sein mit uns, wir wollen sein mit sie wollen trachten von uns, wir wollen trachten wegen sie, you have here an interesting twist that the 9:30 is exactly the Plaga Mincha if you've got a 24-hour day, daytime. Okay, let's go now. I want to share with you the first shayla list, not terribly common, but I found it very entertaining. So here is a shliach. It's somewhere in, I think they're in Texas. So there is an expression, Shailas Chacham Chatzit Tshuva. You have a Shaila, sometimes a Shaila is from a person who's a Talmud Chacham. So already, you're on course to find that answer. So here they have a few kinderlach, and a friend of theirs bought them some towels, and perhaps because of COVID, I don't know. So bought them embroidered towels. And so they've got a child called Shalom. They've got a child called Mendel. I don't know who else. I don't remember the names of all the children. And so their friend ordered probably online and had these towels embroidered with the name. His name is the child's name is Shalom Dover, but it's not probably known as Shalom. So so the father's asking Gashayla, can we use this towel in the bathroom? Because there's a din of not mentioning the word Shalom in a bathroom. So here we have, let's go through straight to the halacha. We have here in Hilchos Krishma, it says, Odam sheshmoi Shalom. Yesh oisirim likroise bishmoi, elo bilishoin las. Some say that you should not call a person by the name Shalom in a merchatz. This is talking inside a bathhouse. Several people are not dressed, and therefore you shouldn't be saying Hashem's name. So some say, in addition to not saying Hashem's name, Shalom is also a name of Hashem. So you shouldn't call someone Shalom. Yesh matirin. When you say, hey Shalom, pass me the shampoo, whatever. So you don't mean the union of Shalom as in the concept of world peace, etc. You mean Shalom as your chaver. Whatever you say from Alocha Mekel, v'chein noyagin. So where people are more conscientious, Ataka will be careful not to say Shalom in a mikveh because it's Hashem's name. So this is his question. So now we've got Shalom in script rather than in spoken. Does that have to make any difference? So can you bring, so according to the stricter view, not to say Shalom in a merchatz, can you bring Shalom in embroidered on a towel? Can you bring it into a merchatz? So then that's in the Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch. In the Sharet Shuvah, on the same place in Siman Pei Hey, he brings here that there is a Ritva who says that Shalom is Mishemet Nimchokim. You are allowed to erase the name Shalom. Ran, however, the Ran in Ksav Yad in Shabbos says in the name of Rabbeinu Yechiel, she'oso lichtev Shalom be'igres horshus she'motze lizreg be'ashpis. He says you shouldn't write Shalom in a regular letter because it's often it ends up in the bin. V'chein onu noyagin she'lichtev Shalom Shalom. So we are particular when we write the word Shalom so he wouldn't write it in full, he'd write it with a stroke, so to speak, Shin Lamed Vav with a stroke, etc. So we have here a chumrah, at least according to some Rishonim, that one shouldn't have the word Shalom in script either being put into disgrace. So the saving factor, as I think one of you have pointed out, that there is a misspelling here, that the Vav has been spelt with a final nun. So as a result, I felt that's enough of you can be Masaymech on. It hasn't been written properly, and therefore you are allowed to bring it into the bathroom, etc. Whilst I was looking around for this, I found something very interesting. In modern Hebrew, shalom, yeah? You say shalom means hello. And we know that Mishnah at the end of brachas, hiskinu levorach chaveri b'shem, and we have the whole thing there. And so that's what doing shalom is bringing Hashem's name. And actually, by the way, I'm sure a lot of you know that the word in English, God, goodbye, comes from short from God be with you. That's where it comes from. So the idea of shalom, Hashem should be with you. So I saw that some poskim were asked the following question: can you say shalom to someone who's bareheaded? And the likelihood is he will also say shalom back, and but he's saying Hashem's name without his head covered. I think the merit of saying shalom and good relations overrides the consideration of him of saying shalom back without his head covered. Let's take a look at the chats. Right. So you already, our resident Sofer already picked up on the inaccuracy of the Vov. Right. And so also from Manchester, thank you. Right. So all of this, that's because of the online order firm, or whoever wrote to them, spelt it wrong. And if you may know, on the typewriter, the Vov and the long nun are right next to one another. Just one last point about that. Thank you, Reb Naftali, about your ha'ara. In Tovshin Mem Aleph, around then, the Rebbe launched the Union of Tzivos Hashem, and they started becoming an emblem that children could join this club, and they have an emblem, and on the emblem is written Tzivos Hashem. And when Rebbe Zalman Shimon Vorkin passed away in Adar Tovshin Memhei, so there, Tovshin Memhei, yeah. So then the community put out a sefer, a memorial volume called Kovetz Razash. In that volume, there is a long article, about 8 pages, by Reb Moshe Wiener. Reb Moshe Wiener, who's the author of Hadras Ponim Zokein and Kuda Bas Melech. So he wrote a whole article about children wearing this Tzivos Hashem emblem whilst going into, well, where the toilet, the bathroom, etc. And he finds some kind of justification. And just one point which comes to mind, there's a posuk, V'diglu olai ahavo. V'diglu olai ahavo, and then there's a medrash which says, V'dilugi olai ahavo. They're jumping around. I love the way they jump around. And the medrash says, you've got kinderlach in a cheder, and sometimes they'll jump around. They'll jump on the desks, on the tables, and sometimes they're sforim, and sometimes there may be a little bit of disgrace. And Hashem says, I love it. The dilugi olaya, the fact that the children are jumping around, and it may sometimes be a little bit disrespectful, but the Ebershter loves it nevertheless. So he brought that in the context of Hashem's name written on the Tzivos Hashem. However you read the Tzivos Hashem, is it Hashem's name? But he brought in that as a saving factor. Let's go on to the next question. This is a shliach somewhere. I've forgotten already. It's the beginning of the week, so I've already forgotten who asked the question. So there's a shul being built, and the Aron Kodesh is built on with like a cantilever, like brackets. Instead of the Aron Kodesh sitting straight on the ground, the Aron Kodesh is on brackets and jutting out from the wall. So there is a letter of the Rebbe talking about an Aron Kodesh which is like bulging out of the building, which the Rebbe questions whether that's appropriate. But this is a different story, and so he's asking whether this is appropriate or not. Now, it does say in the Gemara that you're not allowed to hang a Sefer Torah, to keep it suspended. It's brought in Hilchos Tefillin about keeping Tefillin suspended. So to leave a Sefer Torah hanging from a hook would be considered disrespectful. The Chayei Adam, he goes one step further. Well, let's read it inside. Osur litloi Sefer Torah. You're not allowed to suspend the Sefer Torah. I feel like Shemed is Aron Kodesh. But Aron Kodesh, even if it's in Aron Kodesh, not to suspend the Aron Kodesh is also osur. Even if it's screwed to the wall, but it's suspended, so the Chayei Adam objects to that. Now, Chayei Adam was a contemporary of the Alter Rebbe. Then we have the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, who was about a generation or two later. The Kitzur Shulchan Aruch is primarily from 3 Sforim. There's 3 main sources: Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch, the Chayei Adam, and the Derech HaChaim for Rabbi Yaakov Lee. So those are his 3 main sources from which he collated and made his sefer. Of course, he was a goyin in his own right, but those were his main sources. In the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, so that's in Siman Chof Ches. So you've got the main Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, then he's like his what we would call like the Tosfos, yeah, like the commentary on the side. So he writes, that which the Chayei Adam has an objection to Sefer Torah, which is held to the wall with screws. I've written I've got my own notes on my Chayei Adam that it's not. There's no compelling proof from the in what he says, and the Rif and the Rosh don't quote this this thing, etc. So basically, the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch disagrees with the Chai Adam. He does allow an Aron Kodesh which is suspended on, with pegs, with the brackets, etc. So for some reason in that shul, whether the designer felt it was more aesthetically beautiful, it should be on. So there is a mokim to be machmir, but not really such a problem. Let's move on then. Okay, now we've got here another. I want to share this question about visiting graves within the first year. Unfortunately, as a community, we've lost several members in the past year, and I keep on getting this question again and again, and I felt I should address it, in public. So we have here, the top of the page, you have the Chaya Adam, sorry, not Chaya Adam, the Nitei Gavriel, who writes, Yesh Noyagim, there are those who have a custom, She'ein hoilchim al kvorim lispalal levakesh bakosha bischusom bishone rishono, not to visit graves, to plead for help in the merit of the deceased in the first year. To go there and say Tilim is okay. So the idea is that within the first year, so then the nifter has their own business to have to deal with before being able to deal with helping their beloved ones down here. And so that's where this comes from, not to go there to daven. Normally, when it has a need, so Minig Yisrael, you'd go already. Kolev and Yehoshua went to the Kivrei Ovis, the Chevron. So there is this idea of going to the Kavorim of tzaddikim or of parents, etc., to ask them to daven for you. So this we wouldn't do within the first year, but to go there and say Tilim, that's okay. Now then we have here on the lower part of the page, which I only looked up tonight, a bit busy during the week. So we have here some letters of the Rebbe. 2 letters. This is in the Sefer Shulchan Menachem Chelik Hey. In response to your question about visiting your father's Tzion, your father's grave during the 12 months since he was passed away. So this, the Rebbe says, it depends on what the minhag is, and there are places where indeed there is a minhag that they don't go within the first 12 months. But in ein ze minhag kavua, if it isn't a standard minhag or standard objection, especially to go during Elul Tishrei, which are Yemei Rotzen, so machnish dois she'ochen yerech. It's not gefährlich to go Elul Tishrei. That's one letter, as you see. It's in Igros Kodesh Chelik Tes. The second letter is about he wants to visit his father's grave, but it's still within the Shnas Avelus of his mother who passed away, and she's buried next to the father. So the Rebbe advises the shoyel to stand at a distance from his mother's grave, and the tefillas he should say by his father's grave. So what we're seeing here, that the Rebbe does take this minig of keeping away for the 12 months. He does take it seriously, and he doesn't differentiate whether you go there to say Tilim or to daven. So Bichlal, there seems to be a bit of a dampener, not to rush to go there. And on the other hand, if you're ready in the Beis Olam, not to go over, if you're going for some other reason went to the Beis Olam, not to go over to a parent's cave, that also wouldn't be appropriate, etc. I just want to finish off this point. We had today a beautiful Farbrengen, and one of our hosts of the Farbrengen was Rabbi Yosef Lander, who is his father's yahrzeit is this coming week, Rabbi Moshe Lander, the Rov of Bnei Brak. So he told over that the Rebbe Rashab passed away, as we know, Beis Nisan Tov Reish Pei. That's almost 101 years ago. Rabbi Yankel actually wasn't in Rostov at the time, because he was helping Rav Rafalovich, who survived and emigrated to Eretz Yisrael. But meanwhile, Rabbi Lando at the time was a single. He was a bachelor. He got married quite late in life, and his whole life was the Rebbe, and he was feeling terribly, terribly depressed. And he would go. I guess he didn't have the Nitei Gavriel. He would go to the Tzion, to the Rebbe Rashab's grave, almost on a daily basis, and he was writing a pidyon, a note. Rebbe, I have no purpose in this in here in this world anymore. I want to remain in these, he says, within the 50 amas of the Rebbe. I just want to, in other words, he wanted to pass away and be buried near the Rebbe, and he didn't see any purpose in living any longer. So this went on for a couple of weeks. And then, after about 3 weeks, the Frierdiker Rebbe, the Rebbe Rashab's son, who was his Malamokim, became Rebbe after him. So he meets Rabbi Yankel Lando, and he says, the Tate givem bamir. Und er sagt, ich habe übergeben zu Yankel, als aufhören schreiben Narrigkeiten. My father, he says, my father was with me. Rebbe Rashab, another came to him and told me to tell Yankel Lando, to tell him to stop writing silly things. So Rebbe Yankel says, welche Narrigkeiten? Which silly things? So the Rebbe Rayat says to him, das weißt du allein. That's your business, and I don't have to tell you which Narrigkeiten you're thinking. Yeah, so that's the story which we heard. Let's just read. Mendel Safran is pointing out is that Rebbe Machman not to visit during the first year, even to say to him. It looks like, certainly from the second letter, the first letter seems to be a bit leaving it open to minhag. The second letter seems to be, and perhaps it's to a place where there was a minhag. But I think there is I can understand that there is a reason for this minhag. There's a reason that one should discourage people going to the kever on a regular basis. Let the gzeira of shichacha, let that gzeira, let it happen, let it evolve, and the person should be able to recover and go back to life as normal gradually. Thank you, Rabbi Yonason, that the story is the recording. Okay, let's one more thing, this is als hashlomis, two more hashlomis. One is someone asked about the minhag of banging for homon. Now, it's asking, where does it come from? The Lubavitcher minhag of homon, the banging of homon is only done when it's followed with a title. Hama Agogi, Ben Amdoso, Haru Hazeh. So we have an excellent resource called Oitzim in Hoge Chabad, put together by the late Rabbi Shua Monshein. So we have one on Nisan and one on Tishri, Elul Tishri, Nisan going through Sivan, and then he also put together for Adar, that's in the Sefer on Megillas Esther. I think it's called Share Megillah, put out by Hechel Menachem. So you have there the Oitzim in Hoge Chabad for Adar and Purim, particularly, is included over there. And this is I'm taking this from Monshein's Sefer. And he quotes here that he quotes from Sefer Itim Labino, Kanog, that there's not only when it's Shmoy B'Shem Oviv, Mishpachti V'dai Bozeh, Kanog B'Kehilas Lite V'Reisen. Then he quotes also from the Sefer Imre Sefer, which is from the Sam Sofer following. He's from the lawyer. But what I'm seeing here, I think it's I want to point out this. It's just without verstehen that Lubavitch is coming from the area, was Russia, Lithuania, and there are certain things which are minhag, because that's the minhag litter. That was the prevailing minhag in that part of the world, and we follow that minhag. So you ask, for example, the Rebbe by davening. Rebbe by davening used, he would bring for Shabbos morning, he would bring a Torah Tamim Chumash. It's a Litvish Sefer, but the minhag, which is, unless we know otherwise, but by default, a lot of Yahweh minhagim are following minhag litter. And this seems to have been the minhag litter v'reisen, the same thing with slichus, we follow minhag litter v'reisen. So therefore, it's not so surprising. That's the minhag which was prevailing in that part of the world. So that also was followed by Chabad, that the banging of homon is only when it's enhanced with a title. Reb Chaim Odz is saying, when I was in school, we were used in school for Purim, and we were allowed to 7 times. When Homon ben Hamdosa was mentioned, right? What area is Reisen? I might be, I'm not sure. It might be Belarus. I'm not sure. Now we're going to the next point, and that is someone asked me, one of our listeners who listens to the recording during the week, he's I think in upstate New York, and is asking me if I could address. There's well known. It says that there's a Tosfos which says that also the reading of Parshas Porah is a mitzvah min haTorah, and a lot of people ask the question, where does it say in the Torah? So I spent a while looking around. Where does it say in the Torah you have to read Parshas Porah? So you have in the Aruch HaShulchan in Simon Tov Resh Pei has one approach. You also have in Meshech Chochmah from the Rebbe Simcha of Dvins, the Or Sameach. So in Parshas Chukas, he also has an approach. And then we have here, this is from the Sefer Avodas Yisrael, from the Koshnitzer Maggid, who was a contemporary of the Alter Rebbe. And he writes the following. If you look at the Pasuk, Vaydaber Hashem al Moshe vel Aaron leimer, zois Chukas HaTorah shetziva Hashem leimer. So it says leimer twice. The fact that it says leimer twice, you meant to speak to the Bnei Yisrael. So what's the leimer? This is a remes to the fact that there's not even a remes. There's a union of leimer. Not only is there a mitzvah to tell the yidden to do it, but there's also a mitzvah of leimer to actually recite it. And so that's, he says, let's read over this. Kadasa oimrim. Moirech kadasa oimrim shapas shpar mideraisa. V'alzeh bo'o remes betoyra shetziva Hashem leimer shafila bezman azeh she'ein lanu bayis lazis porah ketikuno. We should still read the parsha and the Shalom Porah Sosenu, and therefore the reading of the parsha is as if we had brought the parshas, done the Porah Adum, which is very, very interesting. Why he says this, because l'chayra, the parsha, the idea of the Adalat parshas is from Anshe Knesset Agdola, which means from the end of from the beginning of Bayis Sheni, and if they did a Porah Adum in Bayis Sheni, they were ready. They already had the takon of Adalat parshas. When they had a Parshas Kolim to have to bring a shekel. So it's interesting why he says it's just to make up for. Even when you are bringing a Parah Aduma in physical, you also should be reading the Parsha in the Yinavadib of Leimer. Okay, we'll go on. And so now we have what we had last week. Last week, if you remember, we spoke about a doorway, which is the top is curved. And I managed to wriggle out, whatever the word is, of the problem by saying that the most of it it's quite straight. So then the Eibishter geholfen that this week someone else sends me a shaila with another archway, and now here this archway is not very tall, and if you can see where I'm pointing to, he says that over here. No, I don't. It doesn't. I couldn't work out the scale properly. It doesn't seem to be so tall. He says. The top of the straight part is actually basically just by his chest. So where should you put the mezuzah? And so I still felt that you would not put the mezuzah on the curve, and you'd have to put the mezuzah on the straight part, because once it starts curving, then already it could be considered the lintel, and you don't put a mezuzah on a lintel. Now, this question raises a very interesting point. The mezuzah is meant to be in the top third. And the Gemara in Menachos says, Ma tefillin begoiva, af mezuzah begoiva. Just like the tefillin are placed high up, so too the mezuzah should be placed high up. Which tefillin? The Rashi there says it refers to the Shel Rosh. It's easier to learn it because according to the Shaliad, but I don't know why Rashi says it's Shel Rosh. Lepoil, the tefillin are higher up, and so for the mezuzah should also be higher. Now the question is, you have a doorway and you have a doorpost. When there's a din of the top third, does it mean the top third of the doorway or the top third of the doorpost? Now you are familiar that the halacha allows a lintel to be separate from the doorpost. That's in Hilchos Erevin, and we have also in Hilchos Mezuzah. So you can have sometimes, let's say in a kitchen and a counter, and you have here a doorpost, and the lintel is all the way there, and the Shlish Elyon is in midair. The Shlish Elyon of the doorway. Doorpost is there. And I was just thinking about it, imagine you say the tefillin have to be begoiva. What happens if the fella's a short fella? A shorty. Where does he put the tefillin? He has to put it in the air. He has to put it on his head. is begoiva. You have to begoiva of what he has. So the same thing mezuzah. Where do you put the mezuzah? Begoiva, the top of the doorpost. The fact that the doorway has got more space, but that doesn't help us. The door, that's the way it should be like. The only thing I said that bichlal you are meant to put the mezuzah one tefach before, lower than the lintel. The reason for that is, according to some meforshim, it's a harchoka. It's like you shouldn't come to actually put the mezuzah on the lintel, so you should lower it. When you say a curved thing already counts as a lintel, at what degree of curve, at what point do you say that? So for that, I felt that you can put the mezuzah, right near the top of the straight part, and yeah. So now, then on Friday, one of our regular listeners, sent us a photograph of his own house in Manchester, and here again we have a situation of an archway. Before I go further, I must share this with you. This is a sefer, if you can see. It's a sefer which is published all about mezuzah in English. It's written by Reb David Nissen Bressman, whom I know personally. It's a Lubavitcher man who lives in Los Angeles, and interesting why he chose to put archways on his front cover. At any rate, so here we have again a question of a doorway with an archway, and so this is similar to what we discussed last week. It's quite a tall doorway, and what I would say is that when you have a very tall doorway, there is a psak of some poskim, and a lot of us follow that, right? Pesach Gavoya, you put the mezuzah at shoulder height. So even, let's say, you'd say the full height is all doorway, I think it would be justified to put the mezuzah. So at the moment, he's put this mezuzah at the edge of the bottom of the top third of the straight part. I'd be more inclined to say to put it a bit higher. This is not very high. This is about just over 1 meter off the ground. I would say put it at shoulder height somewhere over there, which would be so even if you're going to say that the top F is part of the doorway, it's going to be Keneged HaKosef, and it won't be a Shlisha Elyon, but at least it will be Keneged HaKosef, which I think would be an improvement. Okay, let's go to your chats. Thank you. Let's one by one. May one mass produce chometz matzah for lechem mishneh within 1 month of Pesach? I don't know. It's not on the agenda for today, so I'm going to have to skip that one. What about on the face of the doorway? Again, I'm not sure what the question is. Generally, the place for mezuzah is within the doorway rather than in the. In other words, you're saying to put the mezuzah up here. No, I don't think so. And the mezuzah should be within Chalal HaPesach. That's the right thing. Right. Does brickwork need a mezuzah? Yes, brickwork does need a mezuzah. Right. Thank you for your observations. Let's move on. Some say that the tall Pesach is 20 amas, but the reality is, you'll see where people have doorways even, 2.5 meters, they're putting it by the doorway. And so certainly in Mokim HaSofik, you can rely on that. Okay. Let's move on. Right. So now we got two things which were left unclear last week, and I got a bit of feedback on that, and so it needs clarification. If I can share with you a simple thing, just an attitude. We learn very many times, you learn Gemara, you learn a piece of Gemara, and first you have a Mishnah, and then the Gemara says, I can't say that. It's talking in such and such a situation. And you ask, come on, why didn't he say so? Why didn't the Mishnah say so? So I just want to give a simple mashal. One morning in winter, someone comes over to me in shul, and he says, you left your lights on. What does it mean? At home, in my office. And why did you have to be mafsik in the middle of my davening? So you're going to say, it's okay, it's a car. And it's in the car park. And if you leave the lights on, it's going to deplete the battery. And then you'll have to have a jumper star before you'll be able to go home. Thank you very much. Wait. Because when someone comes over to me in shul and says, you left your lights on, you understand in the context what we're talking about. And so that's that. So what the Gemara is saying, that was the context. Therefore, they didn't spell it out because it was obvious in the context. So now, coming back to the mezuzah question, I'd said last week that between a kitchen and a dining room, the mezuzah should be placed on the right as you go from the kitchen to the dining room. Now, if you come to my house, nicht in COVID gerät, you'll see that the mezuzah is from the right as you go from the dining room to the kitchen. And that is because when I spoke about putting, you have sometimes in these little N15 houses, you can't, the way they were built originally. So you've got a kitchen parallel to the dining room. You come in from the front door and you can go a straight door, one entrance, one door into the kitchen, another door, make a left or right into the dining room. And then between the kitchen and the dining room, there's a doorway. So then you have a dilemma. Which way do you go? From right to left, from kitchen, dining room to kitchen. But Baruch Hashem, the Eibishter geholfen, I built an extension. And I put the kitchen in the extension. The only way I can get to the kitchen is through the dining room. So there's no question there. The only way you can get there, the word is from the word mezuzah is beisecho. Beisecho is bi osecho, the way you come. The only way I can get to the kitchen is through that way. So that there's no dilemma there. Therefore, the mezuzah is on the right as you go to the kitchen. When you have two ways to come from one to the other, when there's a dilemma, so then the casting vote is that the dining room is the mokum choshev and the kitchen is less choshev. That's the hocha b'maya skinon for last week. Right, you're asking about the mezuzah on the arch, like the Mancunian picture with their belt. It depends. That's a good question. It depends how much area. We went through this several months ago. We had a picture also we shared. It depends how large the area is in that foyer. If it's more than dal damas, which I don't know what it is, then it should be mechayev mezuzah. If it's less, then one could say it's all one large doorway. You're right. Right. Yes, and I mean, absolutely. We're talking about when there's no heker tzir, and therefore we need to go back to the priority, which is more choshev and less choshev. Let's now, one more clarification. Last week I said also something that you don't need to have an eruv with a next door neighbor who's a goy. And so one of our listeners, again from Florida this time, so he wrote me a note, and that what happened, you have to make it clear. If your next door neighbor is a goy and he has a rishus hayochid, he's got a fence. But what if your next door neighbor is a goy, but it's all open? In America, many places in suburbia, very, very open. So then you can't pass it over to the neighbor because his garden is a Carmelist. But again, in England, where your next door neighbor has got the same bayit vegan like you, and it's got a fence around it, then you're allowed to pass over the fence because you don't need to have an eruv. But if his next door neighbor has got an open area, then you wouldn't be allowed to pass over to him. Thank you. Yeah. Like, I'm not going to deal with the matzah thing because I wasn't prepared for it, and so enough of the stuff which I've tried to prepare. Right. Okay. So now we have here several shaylas which came beginning of the week. So someone writes to me, out of Pesach this year is on Shabbos. Is there any objection to using manufactured foods on Shabbos until the Zman and after the Zman? So, Baruch Hashem, kinderlach, and you need to give them food and to keep them entertained. So, in Chabad, there is a general minhag Chabad to avoid using manufactured foods. And I want to just say a clarification. It's not a perfect science. This I tell Talmidim, it's not a perfect science. I use Kedem wine, and I don't use Kedem apple juice. It's the same Tzelem Erov, same Hechsher. Why do I use this and not that? Because I don't know how to make wine. So therefore, I need to use wine. I buy Kedem wine. Apple juice. Baruch Hashem, we managed to make some kind of a juice at home. And therefore, we don't buy apple juice. We make it at home or manage that, whatever. So it's not a perfect science. So we try to keep off manufactured foods during Pesach, like the minig of Nish Mishnzach. I'm not going to someone else's house for a meal. I'm not talking about Achnos Zorchim of people who are needy for a meal, talking about stamp for social reasons. So it's mentioned now, Yom Nish this minig. So factory for sure is on that level of Mishnzach, etc. So we avoid the manufactured foods. But on Shabbos, Friday night until Shabbos morning, until the Zman HaYisur, no question that if that's what you need to keep your kids entertained, no worries. What I'm asked every year, well, not every year, but very often, is what about after the Zman? And this is an interesting question. We have several chumras on Pesach. You're probably laughing, several chumras. It's free for all for chumras. But you've got kitnias. It mentions in Shulchan Aruch about not using dried fruit. There is a mention in Shulchan Aruch about honey. Sugar is mentioned in Shulchan Aruch. In Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch mentions Lepoil Anash do use sugar broadly. The Rebbe didn't. Many don't, but a lot of Anash do boil the sugar. But those are all because of the chashash of mashu. In Pesach, I mentioned last week about the anthrax moshel. During Pesach, there's no bittul b'shishim. And therefore, we are concerned even the slightest bit, and therefore we're worried about we'll go for all these chumras. But on Erev Pesach, until nightfall, until Shkia, bittul b'shishim works. So then you shouldn't have to have all of these chumras. So therefore the question is, when we have all of these chumras, do they kick in only by the Zman of Nichtsinden or already from the Zman HaYisur? That's really our question. So here I've got a quote from Nisa Gavriel, Kitnius. This is the most well-known one for Ashkenazim at least. The Chumrah of not eating Kitnius. On Erev Pesach, Yesh Matirin. There are those who say it's okay. The Yesh Oisrin. And there are those who say it's not okay. V'chein Yesh Lohoiris. And that's his advice, that you should not be using Kitnius on Erev Pesach. He quotes it from Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld, the Rav Shalayim, Shevet Alevi, Rav Wosner, etc., Minik Rabbeinu, and that's the general minik. And I just want to explain the psychology here. You're gearing up to a Pesach, and it's going to be chumras. Once a woman asked, "Do I have to be machmir till I platz?" I said, "Just stop, just before you platz." So we're going all these chumras to start cutting corners before you're going in. So mainly till the Zman HaYisur, you're eating chametz mamish. But once it comes Zman HaYisur, so I would advise to already start with the chumra regime of not using manufactured foods from the Zman HaYisur, which is approximately 10 o'clock. We're going to have to deal with that, with the timing in a moment. That's going to be the next thing on our agenda. No, sorry, that's item 11. Well, now on for item 10. Not familiar about the Schmerling chocolate. Let's move on. By the Rabbeim, they actually used Schmerling cheese apparently during Pesach. That's what you might be referring to. Okay. All right. Some of us have got the good fortune of having a spare room to be able to sell off that whole room in chametz. And the poskim, they're not very happy about people, huddling in some corner and having the Sudas Shabbos as if it were Chas v'Sholem like Erev Tisha B'Av. Sudas Shabbos should be eaten in a way which is respectable for Shabbos. But if you do have a room which is going to be sold in chametz, it may be an option to use that room for your Shabbos meals if it's big enough. Is that okay? Because already on Erev Shabbos, this room has been. So you don't sell the room. You sell the chametz and you rent out the room. So if you are intending to use a room on Shabbos, so when you sell your chametz, add in that you're retaining permission that you should be able to use the room until Zman HaYisur. And make sure, by the way, that you have, once you're finished, but 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, whatever it is, you have a way of locking that room, because that room, which has the chametz in it, and it's now going to be the chametz room, it should be locked, and because you can't start using sticky tape on Shabbos. So that's what I'm saying. Think about having a lock on it. Okay, now then we had a question of one of our listeners. Is a bit concerned that to start making the shachris at 7 a.m. is worried whether he'll be able to get muster a minion. And so, especially because this whole bilti seder, which we've had for the past year with minyonim, with etc., so it's conceivable to tell people to daven shachris at home and come to shul for kriyas Torah and to have daven shachris at home, eat your meal, you make kiddush, have your meal, and then your chometz, and then you come to shul at 11 o'clock for laning and musaf. So, are you is that comes into consideration? So here we have: are you allowed to eat a meal before musaf? We have here from Simaresh Pevov that you're allowed to have a little te'imo. You're allowed to have a snack, but pas kabeitz of a so you shouldn't have more than the size of an egg, a volume of an egg of bread or cake, etc. I know we have in Simchas Torah, we have an exception. We do have a kiddush before hakofis and before musaf. It's a minig, that's the reason why we have the bichas koyanim by shachris. It's really mentioned the levush. So it's an old minig. All right, so we do see something about not having a meal before musaf, but yet we see here what happens if, and this is from Nietzsche Gavriel, it brings here that if for some reason things were delayed, so then b'shas al-chak you could eat a suda before musaf. So, and he brings also from Mishnah Berurah, etc. So b'shas al-chak it would be okay. So there is room to allow such a thing, but it's not a lachatchila. And I told the person, if you start making these dreidelach, you're going to have the rest of the year, you're going to have to start explaining why on Erev Pesach it was okay and now it's not okay. So, they might start asking, let's have the Kiddush every week before laning. It might make more geschmack that way. Okay, what I want to address at this point is a very important problem, is that we, in the UK, we're going to be switching from winter time, which is known as Greenwich Mean Time, GMT, to summertime. That's going to be switching over at 2 a.m. on Sunday morning, the first day of Pesach. That's a major hassle because what time do you display on the calendars, etc. And now the Adas Luach, have switched all the times to British summertime on Friday. I have a problem with that, and that is that a lot of us have radio clocks, and I don't mean the one who says, whilst you try to say Moda Ani tells you this is BBC Radio News at 7 o'clock. I'm talking about the radio clocks, which is going to switch the time according to the radio. So you can't adjust that clock before. And so you're going to have people in their houses are going to have, for Shabbos, they're going to have the GMT. So you tell them the time, Sovzman Achila, according to BST, but their clock is GMT. So it's very, very confusing. And what I've spoken to the one who makes our Luach and others who asked me about this, I would advise, for clarity, that the Shul Zmanim, your Shul calendar, should have all the times for Shabbos and perhaps for Yom Tov also, in duplicate, GMT, BST. And then people at home will have the calendar and they will know this calendar is GMT, this calendar is BST. They will be able to at least have a seklorkai, time for mincha, time for whatever it may be. Have your calendars clearly spelled out, both zmanim, and then hopefully some people will have two clocks at home, one BST, one GMT. At least that's one way of overcoming, because as I say, you can't change all the clocks before Shabbos because the radio clocks don't listen to you. That's my 2 cents to this issue. Now let's take a look at your questions. Okay, thank you, Ravario, for that comment. You're saying that since we have a Simchas Torah, we have a Fabrenga before Musaf, then what's the problem to do it on Erev Pesach? Okay, thank you. Good point. What do you gain by eating in the chometz room? What you gain is that you don't have to be so anxious about where crumbs will fall, and if little crumbs will fall on the floor, and you don't have to worry about taking away a tablecloth. It's whatever crumbs you leave there. You're right. The crumbs which you leave there are not, they don't belong to the guy. They belong to you. Whatever you retain belongs to you. but I think that it still takes away a bit of anxiety by having your meal in the chametz room. Right. Let's move on. Let's move on, and that is someone from Manchester is asking. He's seen different times for the end of eating chametz. So Manchester Besden has put 9:02, Machzike Hadass has put 9:27, and Chabad has got 10:06. So very briefly, because we're running late, very briefly, you have what's called Shos Manis, which I mentioned earlier, and that's the 12th of the day. There's two main schools of how you calculate this. Is it from sunrise to sunset, or is it from dawn to dusk? And so, as a result, the shorter day, which is the one which is followed by Chabad, so therefore each hour is a shorter hour. So let's say if midday is 12 o'clock and the hour is an hour and 3 minutes, so 2 hours will be 2 hours and 6 minutes, whatever, however it works out. So because you're working with shorter hours, therefore from midday it goes back to, let's say in your case it's 10:06. The Machzike Hadas, they're taking the longer hours because they're taking from dawn to dusk, and therefore each hour is that little bit, another few minutes longer, so the 12 minutes longer, and therefore their sof zman, achilas chometz, will be about 24 minutes earlier than the Chabad zman. And then in this itself, there's two ways of calculating the shos. When is dawn? Is it 72 minutes before sunrise, or is it according to the horizon? So that didn't explain to you. I checked that. It doesn't explain to me the Manchester Besdin Zman, but that's where it's coming from. You've got different ways of calculating Shos Zmanios, and as a result, Chabad Minig is later, the other Minhogim, the Beltische Minig is earlier. I must add here, though, that the Rebbe Rashab was noihig, that on Erev Pesach, he stopped me eating chametz about a half an hour or more earlier, because the Alter Rebbe in Hilchos Krishma, the Siddur says that you should, because our clocks are not so accurate, you should endeavor to say Krishma about 3/4 of an hour earlier before Sof Zman Krishma. So that's a message for a whole year round, as well as for Erev Pesach. Can you be mafkir on Shabbos? You can be mafkir on Shabbos, yes. Right. If you don't have a chometz room, so then, all right, we're going to have to spend more time, perhaps next week, talking through, and I hope to also make a separate shiur for the ladies about the schedule for Erev Pesach. It's an unusual schedule, and I did a shiur on Tuesday morning, which I can share with you the link if you send me an email on this topic. But Bez Hashem, there'll be something again, perhaps next week, a shiur for the ladies to go through the schedule of Erev Pesach Shechol B'Shabbos. Let's move on. So that's point 13. When we say we don't say Kol Chamir when we burn the chametz, because we say Kol Chamir on Shabbos morning. But what about the Yehirotzen? So see, he mentions here that some say the Yehirotzen on Shabbos and some say it on Friday, and he's going to say it both ways. And he says here that the Rebbe, the Bavitcher Rebbe, this is in the Nita Gabriel again, he was nohig to say the Yehirotzen at the burning of the chametz. Could be the Rebbe said it on Shabbos again? I don't know. He wouldn't know either. But this is so certainly when we burn the chametz, we'll say that Yehirotzen, but Kol Chamiro will leave for Shabbos morning. All right. Someone's asking a question. I get this very often. People asking, they want to keep a shelf for chametz in the freezer. Now, I have a problem with that. My problem is that when you store the chametz, it says you have to, if a goy leaves chametz in your possession, you have to have a mechitza of 10 tefachim high. If a goy leaves his chametz in your possession, it has to have a mechitza of 10 tefachim. I don't see how you can do that in a freezer. And therefore, I really don't like this idea of having chametz mamish. You have a separate freezer, okay, it's a mechitza. The door is a mechitza, but a shelf within the freezer. So some people, they've got kidneys, so they've got chickens which were not kosher Pesach. That I'm okay with. But to have mamash chametz, a shelf with bread within a freezer, even if it's wrapped up, I'm not very happy about that because of that din of mechitza of 10 tefachim. Right, almost done, and that is, we have here in point, that was point 14, point 15. At what time is the chametz sold on Friday? I'm still negotiating. I would like to sell the chametz about midday. The issue which I have is that there are shops and which sell chametz. And there are people who are starved from chametz because at home is all Pesach dik. And so they're going to these shops, whether they are eateries or groceries, and they want to have their last piece, their last joint of chametz before Pesach comes in. So for the shops, there is obviously an interest to be open as late as possible. On the other hand, we want to sell the chametz, and they're also from Yidden Baruch Hashem. And so I haven't really confirmed, but I would like to sell the chametz around midday, perhaps 1 o'clock, around then, and hopefully should manage to do it that way. Kadas v'kadin. We don't want to sell the chametz under pressure, and perhaps I mentioned this before. The Rebbe Tzimchana writes in her memoirs how she describes the Rebbe Leivik selling the chametz and the tension which he was under until the chametz was sold. I think I mentioned last week. So I want to do it properly, so not in a rush, and she shouldn't be late in the afternoon. Chas v'shalom, it should be done in good time. Finally, someone asked me to address that we've got whilst UK citizens are not welcome in United States at the moment. As I found out this Monday morning, I tried to go there and they were stopped at the airport. But the other way around, American people in America are able to come to England. But they are expected to go into self-quarantine and to have a self-test. And what happens on day 2 and on day 8? What happens if that's going to coincide with Shabbos and Yom Tov? The actual test, that sticking that swab inside your nose and inside your throat, I don't see any problem. It comes in be mitztayer, but it's not very comfortable. But I don't see any serious objection. I don't know whether you have to put it in a liquid. I don't know enough detail. But the actual swab, perhaps you could do. But apparently, you can do it a day before. I checked up on the website. It was a bit of a steer between one paragraph and the other. But these things happen in the protocols of our, Gov UK. So it says you can do it on or before day 2 and on or after day 8 of quarantining. So if you have any shilas, so then if you could avoid doing it on Shabbos Yom Tov the day before or the day after, and so l'chayra you'd be able to get away with it that way and avoid the shilas. Okay, we finished our. So Rabbi Kievman is adding here that in the Yoman from Shabbos Hagadol, Shin Mem Aleph, which was the same feast as this year, that the Rebbe said on Shabbos, he said the Kol Chamir and the Yirot. So he said it twice, evidently. Okay, fine. Very well. When you sell your chametz, so any chametz which you're retaining for Shabbos meals is not included. Sorry, so Rabbi Kievman, again, you're saying that the Rebbe said Kol Chamira on Friday? All right, well, we're going to have to leave that for next week. We'll look it up and Yishuv Hadas. That we're talking about Yishuv Hadas. Okay, you'll send me. I see you've sent me by WhatsApp. Okay, good. I wish you all a good Woch, and we're going into Chodesh Nisan. B'Nisan Nigalu, B'Nisan Nasidin Legoil should be Geula Shleimo, the Mashiach Tzidkenu, B'Meher V'Yaminu Mamish. It's Motzei Shabbos. We should have Eliyahu Mavasa Hageula take it from Miyad Mamish. A good Woch. I can how do I unmute everyone?
Thank you very much. Good talk.
Amen. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Shkoyach, Rabbi.
A großen, großen Shkoyach. Very, very, very informative.